G'day, I'm Paul. So if you're not quite ready yet for a full EV, I know there's a few of you out there, but you also don't like the concept of a standard internal combustion car and you want a little bit of electric stuff, there's this. It is the Eclipse Cross PHEV. It's a plug-in hybrid. It means you get the benefit of a hybrid with the ability to charge it at home as well to do your zero emissions driving. This is normally the part where I tell you what this competes with, but this doesn't really have any competitors. And in terms of price, this one that you see here, the Aspire model, it's midway through the spec range and it's just under $50,000. If that's a little bit too much, the whole range kicks off at just over $45,000. So it is pretty cheap when you consider that PHEVs are generally a whole lot more expensive than their sort of standard internal combustion cousins. So the Eclipse Cross, today we're going to do a detailed review of it. If you do want to skip ahead to other parts of the review, you can use those time codes on the screen, or if you're on YouTube, scroll down and use the chapters below. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel, press the bell icon. That'll tell you every single time we do a review of a very white car. Let's talk exterior. You've got 7 external colors to pick from. All but white is an additional $740, and then you've got another 2 colors on top of that that are just under $1,000. What about the design? This is interesting. So they've sort of gone with that dual tiered headlight setup. This is similar to what we've seen with Hyundai before, where you've got LEDs up the top here, and then down the bottom you have a segment of full LED headlights. The grille, I don't know, the whole package just kind of looks nice. It's a bit futuristic. I don't know how well it'll date, but for me, it's quite an appealing looking car. It looks sporty and it doesn't look cheap and cheerful. I think they've gone with really stylish design here. So you've got piano black on top edge of that grille there. Big Mitsubishi logo, air intakes here and down the bottom. Then you've got this chrome element just here. This is a bit of a family face. We've seen something similar on the Pajero Sport and the Triton as well. So it's something I think that they're quite fond of. Over on the side here, we have a set of 18-inch alloy wheels. The wheel design is pretty sort of standard. You've got a chrome element on the outside and then a piano black finish inside. And then of course, because it's an SUV, you've got these plastic wheel arch protectors. Over here, you've got a plug-in hybrid badge. Indicator built into the wing mirror. There's a camera on the side there. That chrome element runs all the way along the top there. You've got these matte black roof rails, privacy glass, and we'll take a stop over here. This is where you charge the car. You've got 2 different plug types. You've got a Type 2 plug, which is standard for Australia. Then you also have a CHAdeMO plug, which is the Japanese standard. The Type 2 plug is just for AC charging at a rate of up to 3.7 kilowatts, while your CHAdeMO plug will do DC charging at a rate of up to 22 kilowatts. But the cool thing here is that this can actually be used as V2H. That means you can use this plug to power a home or some other device. And then when the car runs out of battery, because this can be run as a series hybrid, and I'll explain what that means later on, you can actually use the engine as a generator to make electricity and charge the batteries, which can then come out here and power your home. It means that if you do have an extended power outage or something like that, your car could, in theory, operate your home while you wait for the power to come back online. So really cool functionality and not something you'd expect in an entry-level PHEV. Come around to the back. So they've gone with like a sort of shooting brake design. You can see it cuts down here. It's got a fairly sort of sleek rear end to it. You've got a shark fin antenna up the top there. This roof-mounted spoiler with the brake light built in. You'll remember the last Eclipse Cross had this like dual section sort of tailgate on it. Made it a little hard to see out the back of. So this single glass element should mean that it's easier to actually drive with. Eclipse Cross lettering here. You know how some kids steal badges off cars? I think they're going to be here a long time stealing every single one of those. So there's quite a lot going on there. And then of course another PHEV badge down there with Aspire being this particular spec of vehicle. So let me know what you think about the design. Do you like the look of the Eclipse Cross? Do you think it could be improved? Let me know what you think down there. So we are inside the Eclipse Cross PHEV. Start off with the key. You have lock and unlock and a blank down the bottom. Over on the side here, you have a button that cancels the charging timer. So if it is plugged up and the charging timer is active, you can hit that and it will stop that from happening. On the back there, you just have the Mitsubishi logo. It's a proximity sensing key. So in your pocket, and then once you're inside, you have a push button start up the top there. So the design, look, it is pretty bland, and I've got to say Mitsubishi is getting better. Like the new Outlander looks pretty cool, but I think this is definitely starting to feel old and dated. And look, some people may like the design, but I think it could do with a bit of an improvement. This stuff along the top there is soft to the touch, which is nice, but there is loads of piano black along the center there, down this center tunnel as well. What you will notice that's different to a standard Eclipse Cross is this control mechanism here for driving. So we'll run through that when we go for a drive. But for the most part, the rest of it looks pretty similar, which is good news. What about your touch points? Well, this feels nice and soft, and that feels soft as well. How soft are they? Well, we've got our durometer. We've tested the main surfaces in this cabin. If you want to see how this car compares to others that we've tested before, have a look at the link in the description. About build quality, it's a little bit loose, but for the most part that feels okay. And our door sound, let's have a listen. That feels good. Sounds nice and sturdy. Let's talk about infotainment. This is probably one of the poorest infotainment systems on the market today. It's just a big step backward from the last generation of this infotainment system, and hopefully there is something better coming. But look, it does the job. I'll walk you through it. So 8-inch infotainment system, it sits up the top there. You've got some shortcut buttons down the bottom and then 2 knobs as well, one for volume and one for tuning. In terms of radio, you have AM, FM and DAB Plus digital radio, and that's played through an 8-speaker sound system. Smartphone mirroring comes with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Both of those are wired. Again, it's just, look at this, it's laggy and yeah, I don't know. It's okay once you get a couple of swipes in, but you know, it's not the most responsive system in the world. But you can do voice recognition both through the native infotainment system and through your paired smartphone. It's also Android Auto. Same story. It takes up the full screen, but it is a little bit laggy and could be a little bit better. And finally, you have this screen here, which is for your PHEV and also just the standard info. I quite like here that you can see energy flows, the range that you have left and exactly what the car's doing. We'll have a closer look at this when we do go for a drive and see exactly how it interacts with the car when we are on the move. Moving on to safety technology. So you have autonomous emergency braking that works at low and high speed. You have this auto dimming rear vision mirror. You have a lane keeping warning. You've got blind spot monitoring built into the wing mirror. Radar cruise control. You also have front and rear parking sensors and a surround view camera. I'll show you what that looks like. There it is. So look, the quality isn't amazing. It's fairly sort of grainy, and then the top down view as well. Not amazing either. It's sort of hard to tell exactly what there is around the car there. Now, what about practicality? And we'll start with your charging points. So you've got 2 USB charging points down the front here and a 12-volt outlet. In terms of storing your phone, it can live down the front here. It doesn't quite fit big phones though. They sort of sit a little bit wonky. So for that, you can just pop your phone in the cup holders. There's no wireless phone charging. In terms of bottle storage, we'll start off with our coffee cup. That fits in there and doesn't get too lost in that, so it's easy to still retrieve without spilling it everywhere. Our bottle easily fits into there. You've got teeth as well to hold it in. This fits inside the door without any dramas. We'll try a big bottle inside the door as well. Excellent, that fits too, so very versatile. Center console. We've got a little coin tray there and then a deep, generous center console. Let's have a look at the glove box. Pretty decent size. So the manual does take up a fair bit of that, but you've got a couple of tiers of storage there as well. Now, what about comfort? You have dual zone automatic climate control. The cool news is here there is an electric heater as well, which means you don't actually have to run the engine to run the heater, which is good news. You've got heated seats for the front row with 2 settings. The seats themselves, so they've got this faux leather material with this sort of suede-y type stuff in the center. They actually look pretty cool. It sort of feels a bit more premium than just like a cloth setup. And then if you go to the top spec, you get full leather. They hug you in nicely. There is a bit of room on either side, but for the most part, they're good. The seat can go forwards, backwards, and the backrest can go forwards and backwards. You can lift the base as well. So the driver's seat is electrically adjustable. The passenger seat is manually adjustable. The steering wheel, so leather wrapped. You've got these giant paddle shifters. They're static and they help you with regen. We'll talk about those when we go for a drive. And then your steering can be adjusted up and down and in and out. And our reach test. You've got to lean forward to get the volume control and some of those shortcut buttons, but all of this stuff is easy to reach from the driver's seat. Okay, second row of the Eclipse Cross. Not a huge amount of legroom here, so my knees are sort of inside the seat there. My seat is pretty far back, but this sort of gives you an idea of how much room I have. Toe room is reasonable, headroom is okay as well. One map pocket on the back of the passenger side. You don't get any air vents, which is a little bit annoying, and you only get one outlet down the bottom here, which is a 12 volt. There's no actual USB charging sockets. You have a center armrest here with two cup holders, so your bottle can fit in there, and then you've got storage inside the door as well for your bottle. And then finally you have two ISOFIX points on the outboard seats. Yeah, it's an interesting space. I think they could have really done with air vents here, because this is going to get hot and stuffy on a really hot day. Being a plug-in hybrid, it's going to rob you of some boot space, but how much? So manual tailgate. Now in here you have a little over 350 litres of cargo space in its standard trim. That is about 50 litres less than the non-PHEV Eclipse Cross, and that's because of the batteries. There's also, I don't know, I like the way they've laid it out, because it gives you storage for your cable. I think that's one thing that I find with my Tesla, that I can just drop the cable in and I don't have to think about it. It doesn't have to sit on top of the boot. It actually reminds me, very silly side story, but it reminds me of like the Ford Falcon that used to have the spare tyre on the boot and you just couldn't do anything with it. So I like this setup. So beneath that cargo floor, you have a space for your cable down there. Plus you've got a tyre repair kit and then also the 12 volt battery. Then off to the side, you have a little bit of storage space down there and your cargo blind. If you do want to increase the space, I'll show you how to do that in just a sec. We'll pop our bags in. Move that out of the way. It's actually not a bad space. It's easy to load stuff in there. And then if you do drop the second row, pop that all the way down. That expands the space to a little over 600 litres, not quite flat though. So we've hit the road in the Eclipse Cross PHEV. There's a fair bit to get through here, so I'll step through each of the, I guess, drivetrain components of the Eclipse Cross and try and make it as simple as I can. So you have an internal combustion engine that is a 2.4 litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder petrol engine. It alone produces 94 kilowatts of power and 199 newton meters of torque, and that is mated to a continuously variable transmission. And this is technically an all-wheel drive, but the configuration is internal combustion engine at the front, plus an electric motor. Then servicing the rear axle is another electric motor. So there is no physical drive line that runs between the front and the rear, and that means you are saving weight. It's a similar setup to the Toyota RAV4 hybrid that runs a set of electric motors on the front and then one on the rear as well. Your front electric motor produces 60 kilowatts of power and 137 newton meters of torque, so that is the smaller of the two, while on the rear axle, it produces 70 kilowatts of power and 195 newton meters of torque. And the good news here is you can drive this car in a number of different ways. You can drive it as a full EV just by hitting the EV button. And in that mode, right now, I can basically press the throttle all the way down to the floorboard. And it's not until I hit the kick down switch that we get the internal combustion engine coming on to assist as well. And I think that's a really good setup, because traditionally in previous PHEVs that we've driven, the internal combustion engine just constantly keeps coming on if you give it too much throttle, whereas this is just keen to drive on its own without any dramas at all. You then also have the ability to save charge. So by hitting that, it turns the internal combustion engine on and retains the amount of charge that we have right now. And then you have another button here that charges it. And what that does is it uses your internal combustion engine as a generator, and it's basically then pumping energy back into the batteries. It's kind of an efficient way to do it, because you don't have the fluctuating power loads. It's able to use up to 80 kilowatts of that engine to act as a generator and then charge the batteries for later use. Now, in addition to that, you do have a set of drive modes. So you have tarmac, gravel, normal, snow, eco. There's a whole stack there to choose from. And finally, you also have the ability to adjust your regen mode. So using the paddle shifters here, or just using the gear stick, you can go all the way down to B5, which, as you can see on that gauge on the left there, it increases the amount of charge you have as you roll out of the throttle. So there is a lot there, but I think the package itself is really impressive, and I love the way that it's just easy to use. It really doesn't need a degree to figure out how all of this stuff works. Let's talk economy and range. So there's a claimed range of 55 kilometers, but you won't be achieving that. I think that's under absolutely perfect conditions. Realistically, you'll probably get about 45 Ks out of that 14 kilowatt hour battery. And that all leads to a combined fuel economy of 1.9 litres per 100 Ks. Let's have a look at what we're sitting on. So we're currently sitting on 7.2. I will point out a few caveats here. So basically we've been driving the car a fair bit, so it depleted its battery pack fairly early on in the piece, and then it's been out here doing some filming. We haven't had the chance to charge it. So realistically, if you did own this car, you would probably charge it at home and not have to do what we've done. We've actually had to use the internal combustion engine to fill the battery, which of course will lead to high fuel economy. So what's it like if you want to have a bit of fun? This is sort of a sporty Mitsubishi. We'll pop it down onto, actually I don't even know what, maybe tarmac is our sports setting. And because it has all-wheel drive, we can, this is actually pretty good. Look, it does have a fair bit of body roll, but with the all-wheel drive system, you're able to just literally stay in the throttle out of these corners, and it picks up pace and just starts going. It isn't, you know, an Evo 7, but it is pretty fun when you consider that it is just a naturally aspirated engine up the front there with a battery pack helping things along. It's actually quite sort of engaging to drive. You can flick through the menus here as well to give yourself a view of the all-wheel drive system, the super all-wheel control, so you can figure out exactly what it's doing. And you'll notice here as we come into this corner, I'll tip in, roll onto the throttle, and it's sending more torque to the rear as well. So look, it is actually pretty engaging to drive, which has surprised me for what should be a efficient car. Mitsubishi doesn't have an official 0 to 100 time for the Eclipse Cross PHEV, but we've put it up against our stopwatch and this is how it went. Now, what about the rest of it? Let's pop us back into normal mode. What's it like just when you're driving along? Look, it's quiet because it is a plug-in hybrid, and when it is in EV mode, you don't really hear anything happening, but you do get a fair bit of tyre noise coming into the cabin. It really doesn't have a great deal of insulation. Here on country roads, you can hear it sort of piping into the cabin and it sort of makes a bit of a racket. In terms of the ride is interesting. It's fairly softly sprung, and we've got our continuous undulations here. We'll just dial up a little bit of speed and we'll see how it fares over those. Here we are, they're coming up now. Look, it's interesting. It is soft, but it doesn't sort of leave the road and make you feel uneasy. When we drove the Haval H6 here, it was way too soft and it was basically bottoming out, and it just had a complete lack of body control. This is soft, but still has the body control at the top end of that limit, so it still is quite fun to drive without feeling unsafe behind the wheel. In and around the town, I mean, this is where this car excels. It can do speed humps, and even with those 18-inch alloy wheels, you really don't notice things like cobblestones and potholes. It is quite a sort of a rounded ride, and it just leaves you feeling happy regardless of the surface that you're on. And what about visibility? So out the front, it's great. I can see the sort of edges of the bonnet there. The wing mirrors are huge, so I can clearly see down the side of the car, and we've got our blind spot monitor built into those. Visibility out the rear is good as well. The window envelope isn't super narrow, but it's not super big either. It's about sort of where it needs to be. And it is easy to park with your front and rear parking sensors and that surround view camera. Now, if you do want to tow, you've got 1,500 kilograms worth of braked towing capacity. And finally, your turning circle is 10.9 meters. So the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross PHEV, I gotta be honest with you, sometimes I go into reviewing some cars and I know ahead of reviewing it that I'm not gonna like it. And I thought this was gonna be in that boat, but I was actually surprised. This has surprised me because I was expecting it to be a bit dull and dreary, but the way they've configured this plug-in hybrid package is excellent. You've got the ability to do V2H, you've got DC charging ability so you can charge it quickly if you need to, you've got 2 sets of electric motors and a pretty hearty internal combustion engine as well. It really has all bases covered, and then it drives properly just on EV. We reviewed the Sorento PHEV just recently, and that thing is just, I don't know, it doesn't know whether it's coming or going. There's no real way to drive it just on EV because you get the internal combustion engine kicking on all the time. I think Mitsubishi has heritage and they know exactly what they're doing in this segment. So from that point of view, it's really good. It's priced sharply as well. It's still far enough away from something like an entry-level Tesla Model 3 to go, full EV. And it's not overly cheap. So it sits in the middle there and you get enough features inside as well. So I think that some of the interior fit and finish and the design is fairly dated, but if you are in need of a PHEV, you don't want to spend outrageous amounts of money and you want one that's good, this has your name all over it. So let me know down in the comments, what do you reckon? Did you buy one of these? Did you own the previous gen Outlander PHEV? Are you waiting for the new Outlander PHEV? Let me know what you reckon down there. I'm always keen for your feedback. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like it and share it with your mates. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to our channel. But until next time, take it easy.